got Congressman Mike Rogers from Michigan, who's a Republican. Congressman, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So let me just go through some of the things in Romney's not so distant past that may give him a little bit of heartburn tonight. He has called Russia the biggest threat to the United States as opposed to Al-Qaeda. He was criticized for criticizing the administration's handling of the Benghazi attack in a way that was widely panned as clumsy. He alienated people in the UK when he criticized Olympic security on a trip there. Isn't all of that, when taken together, a huge opening for his opponent tonight?
Well, I mean, listen, I obviously have my favorite. I hope that the President of the United States goes there. He does not have a great track record here. And think about what just happened in Russia. They threw out the USAID right before the UN General Assembly. Putin doesn't do anything without a reason. They have nuclear weapons pointed at the United States. They just announced that they would not extend Nunn-Lugar, which is the U.S.'s participation in dismantling nuclear weapons. Go ahead, go there. I just don't think that would be in the best interest of this president. That reset button has really not performed very well and is actually collapsing in on itself. When you talk about Benghazi, he came out and said this is a terrible thing. How early do you wait to condemn a terrorist attack on a facility? I don't see that as a big deal. The big deal in Benghazi is the constantly changing finger pointing of the administration, trying to find fault somewhere and just still neglecting to say what it is. And why that's important is they made a whole bunch of series of really bad decisions, including using taxpayer money to buy television ads in Pakistan, highlighting a video that nobody had seen, and it escalated the violence and the protests in Pakistan. I mean, these are really not good success stories for the president at all. On the British thing, if you recall, the first bit in office, this president sent back unceremonially the bust of Winston Churchill that offended the British greatly. And so, that stuff is going to happen. If he wants to get down into the details about those little things, the big policy is going to, I think, favor Mitt Romney in this particular debate.
Congressman, I'm going to actually switch to politics here for a couple minutes. I know you sit in what was once a battleground state of Michigan and hasn't got as much attention as it once did. But talking to everybody in this campaign, looking at all the polls, it seems as if the Midwest has turned into something of a firewall for the Obama campaign. He's doing much better in the Midwest than he is in places like Florida or North Carolina, even Virginia or Colorado. So based on what you're seeing, is there something different happening in the Midwest than some of these other states?
Well, Michigan hasn't gone for Republican since 1988. And here's what's interesting about all the polls in Michigan that I don't think gets accounted for. The president hasn't hit 50% in Michigan. If you're an incumbent 2 weeks out and you're not at 50%, something's wrong. And so we've seen the numbers narrow in Michigan. Will it go for Mitt Romney over Barack Obama? Not sure quite yet. But I will tell you, if those internal campaign strategy meetings, I bet they're pulling their hair out because he can't break that 48% mark in a state like Michigan, which should have been put to bed from the very beginning. In Ohio, you see the numbers tightening. You see people worried about it. And I think this is what it's going to come down to. I mean, remember, there's 23 million Americans who are unemployed. Their gas prices have doubled. Their food prices are up. They've lost median income. People at the end of the day are going to vote their wallets when they walk in. And the president hasn't laid out any case for another 4 years other than, well, it was hard. It was always somebody else's fault. So let me have another 4 years. I just don't think that's selling well, and that's why he hasn't put to bed a state like Michigan. Pennsylvania looks a little interesting. Wisconsin should be theirs. Doesn't look like it's theirs. I mean, it's a firewall. I don't know. A lot of marbles are going to be put into this Ohio race, and then you got Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin kind of hanging out there as states that should have been put away early and just haven't been able to do it.
Though, Congressman, would you agree that it is the auto issue, the auto bailout, that may be ultimately insulating the president? Maybe he's not at 50, but he's not losing those states right now. How important was that auto deal to those voters?
Right. Well, and from a guy from Michigan, it is a deep blue state when it comes to presidential politics. So I think the premise is wrong. Why isn't the president putting away a state like Michigan with what was the auto bailout? Why doesn't he have that 51, 52, 54, 55% already 2 weeks out from the election? That's the real question. So I would be really curious to hear what their comments are, why they can't break that 48%, 49% in one poll I saw with a 3-point gap. That really is unheard of for us 2 weeks out in an election. If you remember, John McCain that played there for a while in 2008 ended up pulling out a month and a half out because the President Obama's numbers at that time were well over 50%. They're not now. Why is that? That's the trend. And I'll tell you what it is. That $4 a gallon gasoline, we've been absolutely crushed in the housing market in Michigan. Our food prices are up. You take a $41,000 median income for a district like mine, you lower the value of their dollars and increase their food costs, their health care costs, their gasoline costs. It's crushing. It's crushing to those people. That's why I think he can't get over 50% quite yet in Michigan. And I'm going to go out on the limb here. I wouldn't take that out of our category yet. I'll tell you, we think we've got a real opportunity here to actually sneak up and get one in the state of Michigan since the first time since 1988.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you to put your Intelligence Committee hat on for a second. Going back to Benghazi,
Sure.
you know, one of the things the administrations will remind us of tonight, what the president will remind us is, of course, that he gave the order to kill Osama bin Laden, that he's carried out a bunch of drone strikes that have depleted al-Qaeda. We don't know yet who carried out the attack in Benghazi, or at least I don't, maybe you do. Is al-Qaeda back? Do we need to worry about that? What's happening there?
Well, and here's the problem. I think all of this got political interpretation, which I think is an awful idea. I've tried to take politics out of the national security space when it comes to the intelligence community, and we saw it creep in here a little bit from the administration. It's very concerning. Al-Qaeda was on the rise in Tunisia. We saw cells out of Tunisia. Libya, we saw lots of threat streams long before the 9/11 event that killed our ambassador, saying they're looking for Western targets, getting stronger. We saw Al-Qaeda being very successful in Yemen, holding ground in Yemen. We've seen the Taliban with al-Qaeda elements starting to resurge in the eastern part of Afghanistan. So some notion that a tactic, killing one guy, eliminated al-Qaeda threat is a dangerous premise, and I argue it allowed them to pull back when they shouldn't have. That would have been the time to step on the gas and try to really put the hurt on them. Unfortunately, it just didn't happen that way because their narrative was, we killed Osama bin Laden, al-Qaeda is gone, don't worry about it. Well, I think that's part of the problem on this 9/11 case, is that they wanted it to fit their political narrative. And I've done a review of at least partial of the security cables that came in prior to and after, and it's inconsistent with their story that it was absolutely a video that nobody had seen and absolutely a spontaneous event, which we now find out there was no protest before the event. The ambassador met with the Turkish ambassador at the consulate just 30 minutes before the attack, and there was no demonstration. So something is just not right here, and the problem with that is they made a series of really bad decisions internationally, including elevating this video that clearly didn't have anything to do with it. So that's been the problem.
Congressman Rogers managing to give a forceful and articulate case despite the fact that a loudspeaker is blaring overhead in the spin room at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida.
Yeah.
Congressman, we appreciate it. Well done. Thank you for your time, sir.